Ask the Podcast Coach for November 20th, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. He said, switching things behind the scenes, trying to find the banners, because I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Happy pre-Thanksgiving here in the United States.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. Pre-Thanksgiving weekend. I think we'll be back next week as well, but getting prepared to overeat and indulge.
I did something so cool, and it wasn't even planned. I just was like, hey, I got vacation time left.
Yeah.
And I took the week after after Thanksgiving. Yeah. I was like, that's like a double bonus score on. And I was like, wait, man, I get like almost 2 weeks for.
That is so smart. That is so smart. Good call on your part.
Yeah. But speaking of Thanksgiving, you know what is a good way to wash down some turkey? That's right. Oops, a little coffee pour. Yeah.
Island coffee this week too.
Did you get some?
I think finally came and it's brewed. Yum.
And of course, that coffee is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need a logo, if you need artwork, if you need a lead magnet, if you need a full-blown website, if you need a marketing audit or a branding audit, Mark is the guy you want to go to. He's an award-winning graphic artist, and he's a podcaster. And if you need more, that's right, he's Canadian, which means he's polite. And he does great work. I know this week there was another thing I was doing. I was uploading my logo to a speaking application, and the person emailed me back and said, wow, that's a cool logo. And I was like, yeah, I know. So if you're looking for a logo or artwork that's going to make people go, wow, that looked really good, well, then you got to go over to podcastbranding.co and tell Mark that Dave and Jim sent you.
Cappuccino, hold the phone. Take me home.
Extra special today.
And that is a fancy mug that you got there, Jim.
That is. Big thanks to Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Their most recent episode, Project Blue Book. Dave, remember the Project Blue Book days of UFOs? That seems to have come back. So if you're interested in, is it based on a true story? How much of it's true? Based on a truestorypodcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
And you know what's really cool? He's been sitting in the green room, and I get the feeling he's not from Jersey, but we have Dave, who's going to pop in here with some questions for us to help him out here. So I know he's starting a new podcast. Dave, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing? Hello, Jim. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Dave.
We're doing great, man. I understand you wanted to start a podcast back in October. And now you're shooting for December. That's great. One thing I always point out, it's great to have a deadline, but don't beat yourself up if you miss it, because the world has waited 17 years for your podcast already. So they can wait another month, and it's not the end of the world. But what can we help you when you're launching this podcast? What are your questions?
Okay, thank you for having me in your show, Dave, first of all. Yes, I am quite late for my podcast. It's just due to some uncertainty, the pandemic happening all over the world. So that just affected my locality here. And though I'm an Englishman, but currently settled in India, so just going to certain ups and downs here, That's how it is. And my question over here to both of you, Jim and Dave, is that I'm a lifestyle coach and also an etiquette expert. So I'm coming up with a podcast channel which would give you a lot of information and some experiences through some real stories about diplomatic behavior. Okay, so now when we talk about diplomacy, we just we think, that's what has to be handled by some diplomatic people, just like businessmen, or it's maybe relation between two countries or two states. But for me, diplomacy, you can use it in your day-to-day life, which would be quite helpful to improve your behavioral skills, and not just that, but even your mentality.
Sure.
That's what I'm coming up with. So I just wanted to know that, what do you think, how good it can be if I share all these kind of information on the podcast?
Well, the one question I always start off with is, why are you starting a podcast?
Podcasts, say, it's not just to earn money. People have been asking me, "Hey Dave, are you looking to just monetize your podcast and just give some shitty information?" And then I do answer them that no, it's not that.
So it's a hobby.
I'm a coach. I just want to share my knowledge all over the world.
Okay, so let's back that up then, because we need to figure this out. Is it a hobby, or is it something to promote your coaching service?
Oh, you can say both. So it's not my hobby; it's my passion, though.
Okay, so it's not a hobby. That's it's a business then. Now, and I realize you're like, no, not so much the money thing. I get it, but it's either a hobby or it's a business, one way or another. Because what happens then if you say, "Oh, it's just a hobby. I just want to help all the people of the world," and by the way, feel free to do that. You don't have to make money with your podcast. But when I heard the word coach, I'm like, nah, this is probably this show right now is a marketing arm of the School of Podcasting. So, so I agree that this is a great way it's a great way to show that you know what you're talking about. So that's the first thing. Then the second question is, who is this for?
This is for everyone. It's not just being targeted.
It can't be everyone.
Or teenager. So I'm talking about the corporate world mostly. I'm targeting.
Got it. So, Jim, you work in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Do you have a name of the show yet, Dave?
Yeah. What's the name?
Oh yes. The name of the show I've just kept it as The Elegant Diplomacy.
Yeah. I'm glad it has the word diplomacy in it, because it kind of gives you an idea of what you're going to talk about.
Dave, do you get a lot of questions now? Do people contact you today looking for that kind of information? Are you trying to fill a gap of like, man, I answer the same questions over and over and over again, or what void are you filling in this case?
That's a really great question, Tim. Say I do have clients from all over the world, from Australia, States, or United Kingdom, or maybe Europe. So I do keep getting all these questions, and sometimes, it happens repetitive. People keep on asking you the same question again and again. So I was just looking for a platform where I can just answer all the questions. So as I said, I'm going to share my experiences over there through stories, but also I would be answering the questions.
Yeah, bingo.
Well, let me tell you, that doesn't actually work. So it sounds like on paper. Gosh. It sounds like on paper that should work. Like I record it once, people listen, everybody listens to it, and I don't have to answer the same questions. But Dave and I both know you record it once, only half the people actually listen to it. You still get questions. Yeah. So don't. I mean, yes, you can scale out that way, but it won't get it done. Dave, what else do you want to add?
Well, what I have found is you're right. It doesn't eliminate the questions, but you are going to end up with a better educated potential client, because if somebody says, "Hey, what's the best microphone under $100?" I'll say, "Oh, it's the Samson Q2U. I talked about it on this episode of of this podcast, if you want to hear it." And they go over and they get their answer because I already answered their question. It's the Samson Q2U. But then they see, should I have my podcast on YouTube? And then they have which hosting company and all those other questions that you get all the time. So if they do come back now, they're potentially a better educated potential client.
Well, and what I like about that, Dave, is they actually start helping you. So in those channels, you say something, they learn from it. Then the next time that question gets asked, it's going to get asked again. Just know it's going to get asked again. They'll help you answer it. So it extends your influence. It doesn't stop the flow of questions. I want to be really, really clear about that. It just extends your influence. So it's a great way to do it. I think you're onto something there. It's a niche of a niche. I mean, it's pretty tight. So your audience expectations should be within line with what you think that is. But give it a start. Like I think what Dave said in the beginning, don't let dates hold you up. Just get going. You're going to learn a bunch in the first couple of months anyways. The first things you do are going to be terrible. Just know that. Get out there, get them done, get practiced, get rolling.
You've got a name, you've got the experience, you've got the questions. So you've already got a way to start. It's just a matter of, grabbing a Samson Q2U.
You need a microphone.
Recording into don't use whatever you're using now.
Don't do that.
You know what? I've already got one for myself, and that's the
don't say Blue Yeti.
I guess I got the AKG. Yeah.
Oh, that'll work. Yeah. Look at you.
By the way, you should be using that. You should be using that all the time for everything. So get it set up. Every call you do, every Zoom call you do, everything you do, you should be using that mic. You need practice with it. You need time with it. You need to get used to the sound in it. So from here on out, I want you to plug that thing in, and it never leaves the camera view for everything that you do. I'm telling you, it'll make you a better podcaster.
Well, and last night I was playing with the Shure SM. I always say SM, the Shure MVX. And this thing, if you're using it wrong, is a plosive machine. Like every time I said school of podcasting, and it was just like, and I'm repositioning it and I'm putting it here. It sounds great. I was kind of doing a shootout between this and the MV. This is the MV7X and the MV7, the one that's USB. And there is definitely a difference between the XLR of this thing and the XLR of the MV7. But it's one of those things that I said, you know what? I like the sound of this microphone. I said, but if I was going to use this, I would want to practice with this a lot, because about the time I thought I had it right, I would say something about, please bring pizza pronto. And I was just like, I got to record that, because it was just plosives everywhere. So
I feel like you should reach behind me for a microphone or something. There, I got one. Everybody had a microphone off camera except me.
So, but that's awesome. And then, I'm not a huge fan of Anchor. I know it's free. I work for Libsyn, but Libsyn, Blueberry, Captivate, Buzzsprout. You can get a free month using the coupon code SOP free at Libsyn.
There you go.
That's the next thing you need. If you need artwork, go see our buddy Mark over at podcastbranding.co. Or if you want to make your own, there's always Canva, things of that nature.
Dave, anything else?
It was really nice talking to you guys.
Likewise.
First of all, and Dave, frankly speaking, I've been a fan of yours now. So absolutely a brilliant hosting. So I just wanted to know, before I go, a very little sentence from both of you is that, how did you guys start it?
I hit record. Well, first of all, I go back to my days as a musician. So when I first started, right, and I went to play a C chord, it sounded like this. And eventually I kept practicing, and all of a sudden it was like, I was like, hey, that's a C chord. Then I went to an F, and I was like, God, F is a bitch.
We went explicit.
Yeah, I know. So realize the first thing you record doesn't mean you have to release that to the public. Find somebody who you're not related to, somebody who you didn't grow up with, and say, hey, can you listen to this and talk about it like I'm not in the room? A lot of podcasters don't want to do that, because you just spent 4 hours on a 20-minute podcast, because you're going through all this learning curve, and you need somebody to give you some honest feedback. But just start and realize it's a running gag at the school of podcast. Nobody's going to punch you in the face. Mm-hmm. And when you first start out, you really don't have much of an audience, because you're competing with everybody else, and you got to kind of go out, and it's like writing a book. Writing a book, I thought, was the hard part, was writing the book. That's a breeze. Getting people to read it is really, and it's very similar with podcasting. Once you get it up and it's in Apple and Spotify and all that, now you're like, okay, now what? Well, now I got to go get people to listen to it. And that's just a never ending, marketing and, putting things in your email signature and all the other stuff. But don't, what do you think is the biggest hurdle? Like, why are you, I know you said, life happens, and that's always going to happen, but what do you feel right now is the biggest hurdle for you to move forward?
I don't think so. That sits as a hurdle for me. It's just me being a bit of lazy butt, on the couch. So that's what I have to work on. That's nothing else. So as you rightly said, I just have to get my podcast recorded. So I was in the hospital for last month, and now I've been recovered completely. But still, there is some weakness, some tiredness sitting for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on. So once that's done, as I told you, I'm thinking of December first week to just upload my first episode.
Yeah, and the other thing you have to keep in mind is when it comes to getting into Apple, I think their deadline, I want to say December 18th. It might be December, but if you want it if you want your podcast to start in January, I haven't got the email. But I know Apple goes on vacation basically the last 2 weeks of December. So you could even put up like a teaser, hey, coming in January, the podcast from, Dave Madison, et cetera, just to have anything there. You can always take it down later. But I know the other thing is Rob Walsh from Libsyn always talks about how it takes about a month to get kind of trickled down through all the apps that pull from Apple's back end. So if you really wanted it in like January 1st to be everywhere, you'd want it like launched next week, basically. So again, don't worry about it. But just realize that when it comes to submitting to, Apple, Google, Spotify, and Amazon and all the other ones, sometimes that can take a week. So it's not going to be, flipping a switch and things like that. So
I heard about it. I heard about it from a lot of people. It's just the Apple dirty work. That's what they say. So, not that experienced with it. So this would be my first time with Apple. So, any couple of thoughts on Red Circle? How is the hosting platform?
I used to not like them because they were free, and I don't like any free host because their business model doesn't work, which is it's free and then we'll pay for your hosting with advertising. So what happens is somebody gets on their free service, they build up an audience, and when they get a big enough audience to get ads, they move to another place where they don't have to give away the money for the ads. And consequently, the media host goes out of business. Well, Red Circle actually just started charging for their service. They do have a really nice, if you want to insert ads into so if you wanted to promote your coaching service, you could dynamically insert that into that service. So their stats are meh. They're IAB certified. If you don't mind that they're not the prettiest things on the earth. And they have some unique features where you can actually make a folder of like 4 ads, and then say all of them obviously being different, and then say, hey, at this point, I want you to grab one random ad from that list of 4. And that way you're not playing the same ad, hopefully over and over and over. But they're okay. They're not Anchor. They're not completely free. They're not trying to get you to use just their platform, so they will syndicate to other places. So it's not my top 5, but it's not one that makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit. So that's a bonus.
So would you recommend Buzzsprout?
Buzzsprout is okay. The thing that drives me nuts about Buzzsprout, it's a super easy interface, but that's because they're converting your file. So like I export this show at 128 kilobits per second stereo. You cannot get that at Buzzsprout. If you upload a WAV file, you're getting a 96 kilobits per second mono. If you upgrade, you're getting a 192 stereo. And I'm like, one's too small and one's too big. I want this. And you can't do that. Now the trade-off is everything over there is drop dead simple. So you just upload it and this and that. So it's and they have the dynamic. You can put dynamic stuff at the beginning or end of their show. So I'm actually working on a course right now that's going to give 10 minutes on each podcast host. And I'm going to give that away for free. So you can kind of see, because really it's like an interface. It's half of it is like, I guess that's the one thing. Know that it doesn't matter who your media host is, said the guy who works for Libsyn. That's not what drives your numbers up. What drives your numbers up is having great content, being in all the different apps, and then making it easy to share and subscribe to your show. Tom's in the chat room from Edison Research and from I Hear Things. Great guy. And he talked about it at Podcast Movie, master your craft. So know exactly what your audience wants and give it to them. Do it in a way that's not distracting, that your audio is horrible and things like that. And do it in a organized fashion. Like Jim and I today, we did our ads, and then we didn't talk about French toast and how our cat peed on the bed and how much I hate Bob Seger. We got right to the content.
Yeah.
So
which was you today?
Yeah, which was you?
Which was you.
Exactly.
We got right to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave, anything else?
Okay. Oh no, nothing. Jim, any final thoughts from you, Jen? Any kind of suggestion or advice which I can work on before I start my podcast?
Get it going.
Yeah.
I think I'll just be real clear. I think you're just stalling.
Yeah.
So just get it going. Don't overthink it.
I have tapes of me and my best friend doing this for hours.
Yeah.
And we would do that for hours, and he'd be over there and he'd jam away. And then I would, when you're a musician, you call it woodshedding. Yeah. So go record anything. Go read the phone book and record it so you can practice getting good recording levels. Yeah. And just realize that on the other side of that nervousness is something really cool. It's not scary. It is scary, right? It's scary because it's new and you've never done it. But podcasting will change your life. You're either going to end up with really cool friends or a really great story about how, wow, that just didn't work.
Exactly. Because it may not work. Yeah. Like you may do this and no one will listen. That's a possibility. We always think everybody's going to listen, and it's a very big possibility. So, Dave, get it rolling.
Yeah, get it rolling, buddy.
Wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful, guys. Thank you very much.
Great having you. Great having you. Thanks for staying up late for us. You bet.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. You David, you mentioned listening to your audience, and this week, and over the last couple of weeks, we had a podcast I did last year that I put a bunch of production into. We launched on YouTube. We did it we had an RSS feed and podcast and all kinds of stuff to it, and it just didn't do anything. Like it just didn't go anywhere. And so I surveyed the audience. I was like, why are you guys not listening to this? And they were like, well, we don't like this and we don't like that, and this didn't work.
Wow.
So you know what I did? I took all that stuff out and I relaunched it. I actually reloaded. I fixed the audio and just reloaded it into the RSS feed, into the podcast feed. So anybody going in the future is hearing the new version. And then I told them, I said, hey, I fixed it.
Yeah.
Go back. If you go, I listened to you and I fixed it. It's available. And everything I'm going to do going forward, it's going to be based on your feedback, right? You gotta. It's sometimes.
And if they come back, that's huge.
Yeah.
Like when they realize, wait, I can affect the podcast.
I know.
Like I can steer. Like you're not just gonna make me ride in the back seat. Nope, you can steer. Where do you want me to go?
Let's be really clear. I liked my idea.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I thought this was the best. Right. And when they were like, no, actually it's not. You kind of go, oh, exactly. So we're working on those, and we have some new ones coming out next year that are in the new format. And I'm kind of hoping for a new launch. Sometimes you get it wrong.
Yeah. Sometimes it gets tweaked. Great question here from Diane in the chat room. She says, so if most hosting platforms are the same, well, I didn't say that. I said they don't help you grow your audience. What should be the deciding factor? I use this analogy. Jim, you can tell me if this makes sense or not.
Yeah.
If I have a Toyota Camry, I think, Corolla, something, it's fine. Great gas mileage. Not super fast, not super slow. But if I was driving to Florida, I would want to take my brother's van. Now, it's slower. They both have air conditioning. They both have cruise control. But he has those captain's chairs that are just a little more comfy. I've got a little better view out of it. The stereo system's a little better. So it's not going to get me there any faster, but the interface is a little easier. And to me, that's why I'm making this course on how to choose a podcast host, where it's like, here's what it looks like when you do an episode. Here's what their player looks like. Here's what their website looks like. Because in the end, when I look at, in fact, the beginning of this course is going to be, hey, guess what? I may not show you here's what it looks like when you make an episode, because every single page looks the same. Here's where you click and upload your audio. Here's your title. Here's your description. here's your episode number, blah, blah. It's the same thing. So for me, it's the interface and the support, and likewise, if somebody came along with a new car called the, the charge, whatever, the charge car company, right? And they're cheap. They're really cheap. Holy cow. Charge cars. Have you seen them? They look kind of cool, but it's, and I'm like, when did they start? They're like, oh, they're out of Poughkeepsie. They just started. The founder was a guy that used to work at Uber, and he's got a gazillion dollars. He started a new car company. You should get him, man. Check it out. It's free. And they have, a built-in charging station in the thing. I would be like, am I going to drive across the country in a car that is unproven? I know that the owner has like great amount, but it's like, that's part of it. I think some of it. Yeah. So
there's no one thing, right? There's no one thing to be like, oh, because of this. When I bought, I just recently bought a brand new Subaru Legacy. I walked into the dealership, saw the one I wanted. I went, I'll take that one. And the guy was like, whoa, wait a minute. Yeah. Do you want to drive it? I was like, no. He was like, we should probably drive it. Like, I mean, he was trying to talk me into that. And then we drove it around the block and I got in. It was a thing. I had a previous vehicle from Subaru that I really liked. I had driven one of these before. In the moment, I didn't need to do a bunch of research. I had already made up my mind, right?
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of factors that went into that, though. It wasn't a podcast that influenced me to do it. It wasn't, right. It was, I did my research and had my own experience in it. So I think sometimes, Dave, when this question of which host should I go with, you need to do some research because we don't know what kind of podcasting you're going to do. We talk about them all. This, to your point,
Well, she asked, do hosts differ greatly in stats they offer?
Not really. Some, but like, not really.
My favorite is Simplecast will show you what time it was listened to. And I want to go, how does that work? Like, is that my time zone, their time zone? But most of them show how many downloads. Most of them show geographic data. Here's what city it is.
And there's adamant fanboys and fangirls on every side of it. Whether you go, the only time you should question this if one of them pops up and nobody's talking about it, then you need to ask some questions. But all the major players out there, Blueberry, Libsyn, Spreaker, what's the one they just mentioned a second ago?
Captivate, Buzzsprout.
Yeah, Buzzsprout,
Podbean,
Libsyn. Take a look, shop the price, see if it's what you're looking for, pull the trigger.
The other thing too is just because somebody has a feature doesn't mean you're going to use it. And I know sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. I bought Vidyard, was a video service I was using for a while because they had all these bells and whistles. And when I actually got in, the interface again was crap. Like I actually had to start writing code to get it to do what I wanted it to do. And once they figured out that I did that, they're like, you can't do that. You have to upgrade, because I'd kind of found a backdoor in. And it just dawned on me that I don't need all these extra bells and whistles. And now I use Loom. Oh, dude, is that a grandkid?
I just had a Zoom moment.
That is adorable, man.
She's
adorable.
I know. She likes to come back here and say hi. Sorry about that.
No, that's awesome.
She wanted to read her book, and if this was Home Gadget Geeks, I probably would have read the book to her.
There you go. So that's the other thing I always say: don't get too wrapped up in the features and ask yourself, am I going to use that feature? Because you might end up paying for stuff. Like Vidyard was not cheap, and I was kind of, and then the thing that really drove me nuts, that's the other one, support. So I always say, if you want to have fun, said the guy who works on the support team, send the support team a question let's say you narrow it down to Libsyn and whatever Buzzsprout. Send an email to both and see who replies the first. I have a hard time not selling Libsyn when this question comes up, but I always say, hey, when Barack Obama was on Mark Maron's podcast, he had 900,000 downloads in 24 hours. We didn't blink.
Yeah.
Can you say that of the other one? So
she might show back up again.
Okay.
Looks like her grandmother caught her.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, Here,
Yeah, come on.
Come on.
I don't know what she wants. She won't. She's. Oh, okay. I saw the goldfish.
Nice.
Sorry.
But Tom is saying that, yeah, Libsyn got a CEO. We are making some good moves with Advertise Cast. And what was interesting, I actually spoke to the CEO for an hour and a half last week because he did like a big town hall meeting for all the Libsyn employees and said, look, we're approaching 100 employees. I forget exactly where we're at, 80 something. He's like, and over the next 100 days, I'm going to meet 100 people. And I thought I thought this was going to be like a 15-minute like meet and greet. I'm Brad, you're Dave. I met him before. I was in Pittsburgh once and he was there. And man, we went in way deep into the weeds of the podcast industry and stuff. So it was really cool. He was a good guy. Yeah.
Nice.
So, but
busy morning so far. That's pretty nice.
It has been a busy morning. And some other people that I always love to meet. He said, trying to get his screen to share.
As you're bringing that up, I need a little more. I need some coffee.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking a lot. So there is that, that coffee. And yeah, we always like to thank our awesome supporters. Awesome people like James at the Dog Podcast Network. If you have a pooch, if you have a hound, if you have that cute little doggy, and you want to listen to a podcast while you're walking the dog, this is a great place. They got long shows, they got short shows, all about dogs and being a better dog owner and keeping your little friend there healthy. Check it out over at Dog Podcast Network. And then we always thank our $20 supporters. People like Glenn the Geek Hebert at horseradionetwork.com. Glenn will be on the next episode of the School of Podcasting. When I met Glenn in Florida, he shared some slides about some stuff that was happening with his audience and how he is affecting them. And we were just talking with Dave, and I said, on the other side of that nervousness, great things happen. That's kind of what we're talking about, because Glenn had no idea. In some cases, you're like, hey, is this thing on? And it turns out it is, and you can actually affect people. So Shane over at tourpreneur.com, if you operate a tour business or plan on starting one, well, then you got to check out tourpreneur.com. Felix over at the Latin Podcast Awards, it's dedicated to enhancing the visibility of Latinx podcasts around the world since 2017. Find them at latinpodcastawards.com. Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com. So if you're a pilot, you want to check that out. And then we got a new one. We switched. You know where you love her, Kim Craggy and DR Fay. They now have podcastmanager.info. So if you're looking for editing and production or good show notes or recruiting guests, you can check them out over at, again, podcastmanager.info. KJST Media is an LGBTQ+ founded company focused on helping all levels of podcasters to grow their podcast, regardless of what you're looking for. Caden is there to help you. Again, check them out, kjstmedia.com. Michael Delaney over at Baby Mountain Radio Productions, where podcasting and hard work are made fun. Check him out, babymountainradio.com. Greg over at Debt Shepherd. So if you are looking at 2021 and going, I got to do better on my finances in 2022, check out Greg over at debtshepherd.com, where he is teaching financial wellness. Greg over at the Indie Drop-In Network. If you've got a scary story, a comedy story, or a true crime story, he's got an audience waiting for those kind of episodes. Check him out at indiedropin.com. And a white screen of death, where something used to be. This is a polar bear eating vanilla ice cream in a snowstorm. And thanks to all our awesome supporters. You can find them again at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And if you're like, I don't want to do the monthly thing, check out askthepodcastcoach.com/store, where you can pick up my book and do one-time donations and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So thanks to all those people. And starting in 2021, we're going to do something different. And I think what we're going to do is this kind. Let me go back and show you. We're still thinking about this, but I realized basically in a nutshell that, and I love my awesome supporters, but the more I get, the longer that segment's going to get. And so what I think we're going to do is something like this, where I'm still battering around this idea of I'm going to, on the screen, have them while we do the show, partly like every now and then we just might pop up somebody on the screen and we won't freak out. We'll just kind of notice that and, kind of just have this going for a little bit so that it won't be an audible shout out. That will be put in post is what we're thinking now at this point. So I'm still mulling over the idea. I just realized that when I listen to shows like No Agenda and things like that, doing shout outs kind of doesn't scale, because what happens is if people tune in for an hour-long show and in the middle you start doing shout outs, and all of a sudden what used to be an hour show of chocolatey goodness is now about, I don't know, 25 minutes of chocolatey goodness and 40 minutes of you going, and Steve and Poughkeepsie and Marge and, Tallahassee. And, it's like, which on one hand, I'm super grateful for those people, but it's kind of a weird, not sure how that's going to work kind of thing. So I'm trying to figure it out. And then we also, starting in January, I think I need to figure out what's going on right now. Doing 2 shows is really what this is. We have a 60-minute version and a 90-minute version. And I think we're going to do away with the 60-minute version. Like everybody, and it'll either be 60 or 90. It'll be at least 60 or 90, but I'm not going to do 2 versions, one for Patreons and one for extra people. I just haven't figured out that yet, but just know that's coming in 2021. And if you have any questions or any ideas, let me know. So who's we? And Jim, you are muted.
Yeah, the we is Dave and I. That's we've been talking about this.
Yeah. So
it's time to shake things up a little bit, right? I mean, I think we've been doing it this way, this format for a while, and just kind of thinking through, optimizing. Earlier in the chat, someone had asked the question. I had said, listening, you got to listen to your audience, right? And what if your audience wants something different? You have to make that determination. Do I want to do something different? Because you don't have to. And Dave, I think we're hearing, and this is a combination of both. We're hearing from the audience. We're thinking ourselves. We're the back end processing is getting a little too much for you, just to be honest, based on the time you're spending doing it. So
I started about like this morning, like right now as I look up, I am an hour and 37 minutes into this, and it will probably end somewhere around 4:00, because I guess we can get into how the sausage is made. I download the full video from YouTube and upload it again to YouTube. I go into the original version of YouTube and cut off the last half hour. I then and I put in chapter markers because I think our show needs it. That's a good question for the chat room. Do you guys use the chapter markers in the show? Because I put them in there because I realize in 90 minutes we've covered 9 different topics, and somebody may not be interested in such and such. So, you can jump to the next topic. That doesn't take a lot of time, but it does when all of a sudden I have the 60-minute version and I change it to the 90-minute version and I add something, and now I have to move every chapter marker that I just made. It all sounds kind of icky, but just exporting the 90-minute show last week took 18 minutes. And that's the other thing I think that kind of, okay, so Gary says yes, and 2 people say no. But it's one of those things where it takes up a lot of time. And on one hand, I don't want to complain about my patron. But on the other hand, if you start breaking down, okay, I spent X amount of hours per month and I got this much, I'm kind of doing it for the money. I mean, the idea of this was to, get potential consulting clients. I always did this, number 1, to test Blog Talk Radio. And then number 2 was those people that can't afford consulting. I was like, well, if you want to get up at 10:30 in the morning, I'm over here. So that way I'm not turning people away. So, but there have been times especially this summer, when I was like, I get done and it'd be 5:00 or 5:30. Because I spent 15 minutes, jamming a sandwich down my face, that I'm like,
what's our weekly numbers from a download standpoint?
That's a good question.
Let's just do some open analysis on this thing.
I honestly
think
don't
through, because you might be working for minimum wage, which
I'm working for less than minimum wage. That's
which
the problem.
Is okay. Like it's okay if that's what you want to do.
I did the that's the other thing is I when I started tracking the time that I put into it, and then I looked at that, and if I look at my stats in Libsyn and go to episodes, better than I thought. Oh wait, that's because that's my old shows. Because I'm looking at stuff from like 2013. I was like, wow, 1,700. Anywhere from the low number on my screen, which is interesting, is 125. Let's talk about interviews. I want to go check that episode to make sure it's working properly, because everything else is 5 to 7, almost 800.
Yeah. So let's say 6 to 800 on a download. in from audio, well, if we took the chat room and we did some analysis just from the names that I see out there, most of them seasoned podcasters who are out here because we're their Saturday morning cartoons, right? They just
Right.
same folks show up each week on the live show, and we enjoy it. It's good. It's great to have them out there, but they're not necessarily, you'd kind of said you'd started this to kind of be an on-ramp for consulting, for more consulting.
Right.
But just from a view of our live audience, plus what I kind of know about the listeners, that probably didn't necessarily work out for you. We've attracted more seasoned podcasters, right?
We've attracted a lot of podcast consultants.
Yeah, right. It's kind of become the podcast consultant show. So you selling your own consulting, like that doesn't seem to make much sense anymore.
No.
Again, just kind of having open conversation around this, being very, very transparent. I think podcasters who are charging for what they do need to go through this analysis. Like, okay, who is my audience? And then what is the, what is the why behind what we're doing? So I don't know, Dave. I'm not going to draw any conclusions from that, but that's just some analysis of like, well, okay, we've probably got the podcast consultants. The chat room is kind of overwhelmingly saying no, they don't do the chapter headers. They don't use the chapters. But we had a couple who were like, no, don't take them away. That's the problem. Once you start doing them, you get people who depend on them. Right?
They just said that on Libsyn on the feed.
Yeah.
And as somebody who uses the chapter markers on the feed, I was kind of bummed that they weren't there, because normally I start the feed, I swipe right, I see the chapters in Overcast, and I go right to the Elsie and Rob discussion. And I was like, and Elsie even said, just hit skip like 6 times. And I was like, okay, it worked. But the other thing I like about show note or chapter markers, I use Hindenburg, is I can go into Hindenburg, right click on a thing and say, copy the chapters as text, and it makes timestamps for me automatically. So it's a hassle, but it also makes really easy show notes after you've put them in. It's just a matter of when for a while, somebody suggested that I take the awesome supporter segment and put it at the end for the awesome supporters. And when you do that, all your chapters just go, and you're like, and then you're like, oh, it's not that.
To it.
Yeah, one, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it's only 8 chapters, so I scoot this over. I know to drag this over a minute and a half. Here's another one. Drag it to the left a minute and a half. Here's another one. And it's just one of those things that, like, at this point, it's 3:00 and you're kind of tired and you just want to go ride your bike.
Well, and remember, people are paying for a shout out. Like they paid for this. So, throwing it at the end is a little bit, unless we started that way. I mean, this is the thing, right?
Well, that's why I'm announcing this in November.
When
saying,
you start,
if that's going to make you upset, I understand. But on the other hand, if Dave gets too crispy, that's not
it's a balance. Like you got to figure it out for you. You also, I think, have to know that when we make these changes, that we're going to lose. There's to be some folks who are like, I'm not going to listen anymore. It's not what I wanted. If you make those changes, even if they're under the best thought out, communicated, hey, if you get a community together and you ask them questions, they're not all going to agree.
Right.
That's never going to happen. You're going to make somebody mad in the process. So in this process of change, Dave, we're going to lose some folks. That may come back with other folks who find it, who go, oh, I was waiting for something like that.
And we may get more listeners who like the show more because they don't have to fast forward through that thing he does in the middle for 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, right on. Right on. One of the things, one of my suggestions was to show the slides, but not necessarily talk about them.
Right.
But that then, like, most of our listeners are probably audio.
Yeah.
So we'll screw them if we do it that way. So we got to think through.
Yeah, I like the idea of what we're doing at the bottom here. We have all the $20 supporters are going. Doesn't
help audio, right?
But
most of our listeners are audio. What are our YouTube numbers? Do you know? Like, have you ever looked to see how many views we have on YouTube? I bet it's less than 100.
Oh yeah, definitely that.
So 1/5 are audio listeners.
Yeah. Diane was asking about chapters. I use Hindenburg And what Hindenburg does is you can right click anywhere on a timeline and say add a chapter. And what that does is in not all apps, but in some apps, you can just jump to a topic. And the thing I love, and so you just click, you can drag these around if you want to. That's the part that's kind of a weird hassle. What I love about it is I can write up here and say, look, copy this as text. And so I'm opening up Notepad, and all the timestamps that I have in Hindenburg now are there. That's fun. But and adding them isn't like putting them in is not a big deal. The thing that for me has always been like, ugh, is when I have to then do two versions of them. And I know it sounds weird, but that's where I was like, okay, I'm not moving the awesome supporter section anymore because that just messed the whole thing up. So.
Yeah, I would not do what you're doing. It's a good thing I don't do the show edits because I would not do it.
I'm listening anyway, for ums and knows and things like that. So yeah, it's something. Just know in January, whatever I decide, I will let you know. But things are probably going to change a little bit with the show. The show will still be here. That's the good news. Because there are other bonuses of this. I get to talk to Jim Collison every Saturday, and it's fun, and I get to interact live with people in the chat room, which spurs ideas for the School of Podcasting. But there's just got to be a way that I can do this and not lose my Saturday and my sanity at the same time.
Listen, I think you should be very transparent about the decisions we make and how you're optimizing your time back, because I think we have a lot of podcasters who spend more time than necessary on their podcasts.
Yeah. And that's where chapter markers could be an example.
Whatever. Yeah. They're just providing too much for what they're getting in return. Now, again, it's your decision if you want to do this. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying there may be some of you are doing too much for the return that you're getting, and it's not sustainable. Just saying.
I could also, if we wanted to, as we go along, and I've tried to make myself do this, but I'm busy like doing the show. But to today we talked with Dave about starting a show, and then we talked about, and it just happened and I can't remember. And then we talked about this thing with changing the show. So it's if I could remember to write these down, I could just write a paragraph and say, hey, thanks for joining us. Here are the topics we talked about. No timestamps, give you enough to know, if you want to listen or not, that whole 9 yards. So it gets kind of
in the editing process, though, you could jump in and go 30, 30, 30 until you hear the subject change. Yeah. Right. Do it that way. Yeah.
So we'll see as we go along. We'll think out loud.
Yeah, Tom Webster says he spends 10 minutes in post-production because he does a lot of work in pre-production, right? Listen, you're paying the piper on one side or the other.
That's it. And this show, I kind of spend time getting questions in case we don't get any. And I usually try to find some that are evergreen. So if we don't, we have a bunch this week we could use. But if we don't, okay, I can use them next week. But there are times, because we kind of go where the chat room wants us to go. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know where we're going. So that does require, in some cases, a little more post-production, things like that. But anyway, so moving on, Kevin has a question about the Tascam Mixcast 4. I have reached out to them after I got a name from somebody in Florida and have not heard back. I did, though, verify with Glenn, because again, I interviewed Glenn for this week's School of Podcasting, that when you hit record in the Tascam and you've got your 8 sounds, which look really cool, they've got little titles above them. So it's a little easier to use than the Rodecaster. But if you go, I need my screaming goat sound, and you go to the next bank because you have multiple banks, it doesn't let you do that once you press record. It's whatever is up is what you're going to use. So get all of your 8 sounds right there. And I went, that's not a deal breaker, but it's, so they need to fix that. That sounds like something that's fixed, because with the Rodecaster, I can click on the little music note and then I can go over to the next bank. So now if I go back to my home screen, I should have the lovely, the talented George Robb with my favorite meh. So there you go. So I couldn't do that on a Tascam. So that's one thing I've heard. It is pretty. I mean, when I was playing with it a little bit in Florida, I was like, this is interesting. I still scratch my head as to why they didn't come down even $20 cheaper than the Rodecaster. I think it's really weird that they they made the exact same price as the Rodecaster.
Well, you always set your price high so that you can discount it. So I bet there'll be some discounts that kick in for sure.
Yeah. Here's a fun question, just because it has the word sex in it. I'm bringing sexy back.
Okay.
Patrick,
That's okay.
That's Patrick asked in, this was the Podcast Movement Facebook group. For those who do podcasts about dating, sex, and relationships, do you have a private Facebook group for your followers or a Facebook page? No one is really interacting with my page, but I feel like a group would be more comfortable. And it's weird because have you added the Facebook thing to, like, do you have a Facebook page?
No, I manage our groups. I manage our Facebook groups
because I know
they're all private. So I didn't get affected by that change that Facebook made.
Yeah, I know. What's weird is there are 2 Dave Jacksons on Facebook. David
Jackson. There's more than that.
Well, yeah, actually, I know 5 in Akron, but there are two that look like me. If you're trying to be friends with David Jackson and you're not my cousin or uncle, I'm not going to befriend you. You need to go friend Dave Jackson. But what's weird is David Jackson, my family and friends account, that was the only one I had. So I made a Facebook page for the School of Podcasting, and the one that's for podcasting doesn't have a page, and it's so icky. But I've yet to put in the thing where, because I know Tom has mentioned how this might be great for boomers, the people that aren't super tech savvy, but they love Facebook. But the thing that stinks about that is the podcast part only shows up on the app. And if you're a boomer, there's a really good chance you're using Facebook on your desktop. And that hasn't made its way through yet. So I just asked because I know it sounds like it could be really, like this is an opportunity, and I've yet to take advantage of the opportunity. I'm tempted to make a page on my podcast side of Facebook so I can add my RSS feed just for the fun of it, but we shall see. But I just wondered if you had done that yet. So,
by the way, as we're thinking about transition on the topics on Facebook groups, it takes a couple hundred before you get any kind of engagement. Like, and when I say a couple hundred, I mean 300 or 400. In anything below that, it turns into a ghost town pretty fast. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you need to really prime the pump. And if you're going to be the moderator, you got to stay on top of it until the conversation gets going. So it's just a lot. It's a lot of work in those, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Discord or whatever. You got to get a couple hundred and maybe 300 to 400 before they will take kind of a life of their own. Then be careful when they get past 1,000 or 2, they get really unruly, and you just, you kind of,
And Kim has a point. Master Cauldron, who is an awesome supporter, has the BDSM. He has a private group. I want to say her name is Ariana or Andrea or some name with an A. She does a show called Living with Herpes. And as you might imagine, that's a private group. Not everybody wants that blasted on Facebook. So yeah, the more taboo is kind of a strong word for that, but something that maybe you wouldn't want to talk about in public. Yeah. A Facebook group is always going to be more interactive than a group. So yeah, exactly. Tom says here, by the way, Jim, did we figure out, can you do the thingy with the chat? That's the technical term for that. Okay, good. Okay. I want to make sure you didn't lose your superpower.
No, I had to sign in. That's why pre-show I signed back in as me. I have a Gallup account and I have my own account, so I just sign in with my own account.
So I wouldn't start a group unless I was convinced I could start it with a few hundred. Yeah, it's because otherwise what happens is if you start it with, like, I have a Facebook group with 18 people. And it's amazing when I can actually get them to interact, because a lot of times it's just, there's not much to see over here. It's like, look, it's
under 50 though can be powerful. Like under 50 really engaged people.
Yeah.
When the understanding is it's going to be quiet for maybe weeks at a time, and you don't have somebody going, "Oh, this is a ghost town." Where did everybody go? If you've got a group that's hyper focused and it's under 50, and you're okay with conversations every couple of weeks, it can be really, really, really helpful. It's quieter. It's maybe more meaningful, type thing. So I think the opposite is true as well.
When I was in Florida at Podfest Origins, right, by design, a smaller conference than usual, And what that enabled me to do is, because I'm walking around with a Libsyn shirt on and people are like, oh, that guy works for Libsyn, is I was able to do much deeper dives with Libsyn customers because I didn't have to worry about, the 7 people standing behind them kind of thing. So
you don't need a post every day to feel validated. Like, good God, just let the group sit, let it simmer. It's gonna be okay. It's okay that it goes a week or 2 without a conversation. It's fine. Let it go. So I personally big fan of small groups with great conversation. Like I don't our Discord group is, a couple posts a week and it's really, really nice. So be careful what you wish for, but make sure if you have smaller groups, make sure you're tending to them.
Yeah. Tom says starting a too small group is just a self-perpetuating sadness machine.
It can be. Well, based on your expectations. If you have a small group and you're expecting them to just be chatty,
Yeah. Gary asked a great question.
Did you forget?
Are you using the Clubhouse Ask the Podcast Coach? Well,
not today.
Not this week.
Oops.
Yeah. Oops. I was busy talking to Dave. So
yeah, no worries. Nobody's out there anyways. Nobody's out there.
Daniel says he's about ready to start a group for my podcast reviews. I took a survey and voted most for Facebook over Slack and Discord. I don't offer an on-site community because it's not a selling point.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, while we have you in the chat room, do you have we'll give you a free plug, a website for, I know every year you do like Black Friday. You keep us all alerted that, hey, the Q2U is on sale for, $49 and things like that. It's a great email list to get on. If you have a website for that, throw that in the chat. So, but he did make a great point. Where did I see that? This one. I love lifetime deals, and I've signed up for a few, and I am finding that lifetime deals are kind of not as cool as you think they are. They always end up adding new features because they'll say, oh, you get everything. If we upgrade, you get it. And it's like, there's an asterisk there. It's like, when you join and we're on version 4, you can get version 4.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But when they go to version 5, they're going to want more money.
But I know people who will only do lifetime deals.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want to pay a subscription. And, I'm going to wait for lifetime. And you're like, well, you might be waiting a while. Not everybody offers that. That's very few places are offering that kind of deal. And what that really means is a one-time purchase perpetual, right?
That's it.
So they're not that's just not the way of the future.
Well, that's one of the things I want to talk about in post-show is the phrase Black Friday. And has Black Friday lost its magic by starting in, July? So
I won't give it away, but yes.
But Jim, what is coming up on the averageguy.tv?
Yeah, Mike Uyghur's back. We spent a little time catching up, just him and I. I bought some power tools of late that have some super cool battery technology kind of stuff built in. Batteries are completely different than they used to be. So anyways, we spend a little bit of time getting caught up. And if you stay around for the post show, I've got a super nerdy way of listening to podcasts in other languages. So stay around for some post show.
Yeah. Tom Webster says Black Friday is now November.
It's February through December. Let's just be really clear about that.
But on the School of Podcasting, I already mentioned it. Glenn the Geek from Horse Radio Network is coming back, and he's going to share some interesting things that if you think like nobody's listening to my podcast, he got some really cool emails from people that had never kind of reached out. And he was like, man, I can't believe like this is what's going on with my listeners. And I said, dude, we need to share that. That's really cool stuff. So we'll be talking about that. I'm also going to be talking about some celebrities who actually started off going in one direction and then changed and kind of was like, you know what, this isn't really me. And they went back to, I don't know, being me, a la George Carlin, and found much more success being himself than trying to be what his manager told him to be. And there are a couple other celebrities that did that as well. So thanks to the chat room. Thanks to Mark over at podcastbranding.co, Dan over at, there it is, based on a true story podcast.com, and James over at the dogpodcastnetwork.com. Everybody else, stick around for some post show. we're back. All right. So, yeah, it just dawned on me that, like, is anybody going to do? Sorry about that. Didn't mean to leave you hanging.
No, it's all right.
I'm thirsty. Is when Black Friday, which is actually next week. I'm like, are there going to be any Black Friday sales? Because I know, like,
Yeah.
Walmart and Best Buy, and
they still have them.
Okay.
They'll still have them. They've been broadcasting exactly what they are, and I mean, the hype is real, and they will still be there. So you might want to. I've heard a lot of people say you kind of want to watch for services this year as opposed to physical products because we're having such a hard time shipping stuff. But listen, I've ordered stuff in the last week that it's gotten here the next day. So I don't know what, I mean, I know there's some items people are talking about that. I don't know if the supply chain is as bad a shape as they think. So
this showed up next day. My JBL Flip 5. So
yeah, your Bluetooth speaker replacement.
Yes, because
I'm not seeing any supply chain problems. I'm not saying that they don't exist because they do. They're very real, but I haven't seen any really. I think I ordered something from NFL.com that took maybe a week to get here as opposed to a couple days. But it's just I would be watching for those services. And then, and I've mentioned this before, again, if you're not using Slick Deals and have some signed up for alerts, you can set up granular alerts down to a model number. So if you're looking for a microphone, you're looking for the RE320, go to Slick Deals and search for RE320. And then there's a little button there that says set an alert. And you can even set a granular alert on, like, is this a super hot deal? Is it just a hot deal? Is it just okay? Is it, and they'll send you an email. Man, I have gotten some really, really good. I bought a brand new powered drill, a little battery drill, Black & Decker. Normally $50-$60. I got it for 20 and at Ace Hardware. And I've needed one. I've been watching for one. And so it was like, how do you turn that deal down? Right. So you make sure you if you're looking for something and you're not in a hurry, get a Slick Deal sign up. And I have no affiliate link over there, but get that done.
Very good. And so how are you listening to foreign podcasts?
Yeah. So at Gallup, we have 6 now in language or non-English podcasts that we're doing, and I produce all of them. Some of them I'm on, some of them I'm not. I don't speak the language. They do some translation stuff for me. But as I've been doing this for the last couple of years, the desire is like, man, it would be great if I knew what they were saying, in 6 languages. I mean, if it was one language, maybe I could learn the language, but there's no way I'm learning these 6. Not now. I barely speak English. Let's just be really clear about that. So, so I'd heard a couple years ago, and I've tried Google Translate and the Amazon services and Microsoft stuff, and I couldn't get any of them to really work in a situation where it was listening to a bunch of audio and transcribing it at the same time. I knew a couple years ago they had started building this feature into Skype, and you're like, Skype? Like, that's still around? Yeah, it actually is still around. In Skype, in the settings, there's a translation feature based on what the language is on one end of the Skype call versus on the other. So you have to have 2 Skype clients to make this work. So in my house, I have my Mac. That's what I'm on right now. That's running a Skype client. And then I have a separate computer. It's a Windows computer that I'm running Skype on. So I have 2 different computers. Then as I'm live streaming these, we live stream them to YouTube. So I just bring up on the computer that we'll say it's on the non-English end, right? Whatever that happens to be, whether it's Chinese or Spanish or Portuguese, whatever. That has the YouTube playing in it. And so it's out of the speaker is coming that language. Then I have it capturing what's in the speaker and funneling it through the microphone in Skype on the non-English account. Then on my PC here, I have a Skype connection that I've made to those 2, and I'm listening in English, right? And you have to send through a translation request. So when I open the call, I say, hey, I want to translate this, and on the other end, it says accept or deny. So I just accept it. Then, as the video is playing, the audio is coming out in another language. It's going from Skype non-English to Skype English, and there's a voice on my end it's not only transcribed, it's translated, and the voice is speaking it in English. Now, is it perfect? No. Does it get me farther than I was before in understanding what they're talking about? Yes. It's about 30 seconds behind, so I'm to be careful as I'm listening to this. I'm not in real time on this thing. But Dave, it's kind of changed my world when thinking about being able to listen in on the conversations that are happening and understand what they're talking about. Because in some of the shows I come back on, take a few questions, we do them in English and in the other language as well. But Skype may be going away because it's like Microsoft's got Teams now. I'm sure this maybe make its way to Teams. But it's a really cool way of listening to. Anybody could do this. If you wanted to listen to a foreign language podcast, you could do the same thing. It was the easiest way I have found. I know it's a kind of a little weird technical thing, but
it's a hack. But if you got two computers, it sounds pretty easy.
Yeah,
to set up.
Yeah, and listen, it can only get better. Like it's okay for today. But it. So what I did to test it is, was to run it through, just play one of the videos of ones that I'd recorded in the past, and then see if I could understand the conversation. Ironically, it got Chinese the best, which is the hardest between.
That's
Chinese and English is really hard. That's a really hard translation. And Spanish, which between Spanish and English is a little bit easier, it didn't do as well. So it was like, that's interesting. Portuguese, it nailed. Like that was when I tested those three languages.
Yeah.
So
Craig says you're putting English teachers.
No, Craig. It. You know what it misses, Dave? Is it misses culture, and it misses passion. And those are things, you don't realize when we speak in language, we add this idea, we add our own culture to it. We, in the words that we use and what we choose, the way we choose to say them, we add culture. We also add passion in there. When I say passion, I mean, we use a word like today we say awesome. As Americans, we say awesome. That doesn't really mean awesome anymore. That's like good, right?
Right.
But if you were to say that's horrific, okay, now you've added a passion element to it, right? And so it doesn't do as well translating those kinds of items, right? It's more literal than anything. So, Craig, no, not yet.
Yeah.
But at least I understand what they're talking about.
And somebody here, Stefan is saying, couldn't you use something like Voice Meter Banana or some way to route it?
That's the easy. The routing is the easy part, right?
Yeah.
That's the easy part. The hard part was just figuring out how to get the two Skype connections set up and then making sure the translation bit is open. I'm actually surprised it took me this long to get here. Like it's an actually pretty easy solution when you think about it, but I finally got it done. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. And then does it translate to Scottish?
No, nothing translates Scottish.
It's fun because when I listen to Colin Gray it's going to drive me nuts. I forget the name of his show, but he has like the cool, like there's Scottish, and then there's like when you go like another level higher through, like I forget the one show that had Brad Pitt in it, Podcraft. Thank you, Craig. And there's a level of Scottish where I'm like, I am down to 1.0 and I still don't understand what you're saying. It's just too thick an accent. So
Gary asked the question. So if I wanted to offer Spanish translations of my video content, I could use Skype to do it. So in theory, Gary, yes. And this is the next step for me, is how can I take advantage of this either in a group setting, because I have a lot of English speaking audience who may benefit from listening to some of these foreign language podcasts. Haven't nailed down the easiest way to get that done. In theory, I could take, if that translation was good enough, I could take it and send it down another channel that they could listen to while they listen to the podcast. That's a little much for most people to kind of pick up on. The other option would be can they join that same Skype call and listen to the same thing I'm listening to? I don't know that yet. I need to do a little bit of testing on it to see what that works. The key was getting good translation. That was really the key. Yeah. I've done this a bunch of different ways and they've all been terrible. The really good ones are good only at short sentences or phrases. I needed something that would continually translate through an hour. Right. And so this is the first time I've gotten one to actually do what I wanted it to do. Now I'm going to start adding on. Let me just say this. If you're interested, if this is interesting to you and send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. And as I do some testing with it, maybe I can include you in on some of the testing pieces. Or if you have questions, I went through that pretty fast, and it's a little complicated and it's a little nerdy. So if you've got some more questions on it, you want to chat about it, send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv.
Yeah, Craig says there's nothing more annoying than a bad translation. And
Yes.
we use Zendesk at Libsyn, and it has this built-in. I don't know if it's built in or if we tied into a third-party service or what. But there was a guy who English was not his first language, and we're translating back and forth, and he's like, "Your grammar is like crap," for lack of a better phrase. And I was like, "Hello, this is being translated into such and such," which I thought was,
Yeah, well, you know what changed it for me is I was on a Zoom call, and Zoom has this feature now where you can have a human translator available. So sign into Zoom, and there's a language option down at the bottom. It'll say, in this case, this was a Portuguese English call that I was on. So half Portuguese, half English. And the translator, then I could choose the language that I listen in, and I chose English. So the translator, whenever someone was speaking Portuguese, they would translate that in English. And when we would switch over to English, they would just say it in Portuguese, right? And so for English listeners, when someone was speaking in Portuguese, the volume would come down and I would hear their voice in real time. Like a UN, like you'd expect, like right? Like you expect a UN. Dave, like this has been technology that's been around for a long time. But when someone's speaking another language and someone just jumps in and translates it for you, and not just translates it, but translates it well, it's a little life-changing. You're like, oh my God, like it's magic. You're like, I can understand what they're saying, right? And so I think this is just the future of podcasting, that we're not there yet. You and I create so much content that's only available to English speakers. Right. What if that could get translated well into other languages? Today, that's still a pipe dream, unless you pay somebody $100 an hour to do the translations for you, right? For most people, that's not scalable. Maybe we'll get to a day where the machine can do that for us.
Yeah. They're saying it was, I think it's Amazon that offers a transcription service.
They're terrible. They're both terrible.
And create a new voiceover video.
They're awful.
I have used, I forget the name of it, but for a while, Tom wasn't putting out a podcast for his newsletter, and neither was, I don't think he is yet. Eric Newsom has a newsletter, and I found a service. It was like $6 a month that did a pretty good job of, like, I would put in the newsletter and it would spit out a robot voice that didn't sound quite so robot-y. And I was like, because I wanted to listen to it. I was like,
yeah, that's the Skype problem. It's too fast. I got to give them some feedback. The speaker is too fast and it's still sounds too much like a robot. So Gary, to your point, it's not ready yet. I still want to talk to you about it, but it's too. So it stores it up. I'm sure what's happening is it stores it up, it translates it, checks it, then it sends it into a reader or a speaker, right? Well, I need to slow that speaker down a little bit. Like it's like you're talking a little too fast. So there's some things that need to be done a little bit differently. But hearing that, man, having it translated for me, that was life-changing. I'm like, oh, I got to do more of this. I got to figure out how to make this scalable. This is cool. So
have you ever seen, speaking of translations, have you ever seen the sign language guy that didn't get enough hugs growing up?
No.
Like he's doing the governor of Ohio. And like, granted, there is, you're expressing through this and that and all this other stuff. And then, but the guy in Ohio is like, he's like all these major facial expressions. And you're like, okay, somebody, like, it's one of those things where, how we say it's okay. As long as your audio quality is not distracting from what's being said. And this guy is distracting from what's being said. I'm like, look, can you just sign it and like, try not to win
going a little overboard. I spent some time this week talking about ASL and how we can, especially like ASL around strings, American Sign Language. How could we? Because it gets left out a lot. We see it more and more. I mean, like in the setting that you're talking about. But Dave, this is another thing. Why can't we have a set of hands or something? Now I know in ASL, a lot of them read lips. So, but there isn't a good there's not a good service for us to use. If we wanted to add ASL as part of an offering here, it would be difficult. Again, we have to hire someone who would have to come in and do the thing. That seems like we should be able to get that virtual at this point. Don't you think? Like,
Yeah.
That seems like that could also be virtualized, so to speak.
Yeah. Have you ever seen? There's a YouTube video where Pearl Jam has somebody who is signing the lyrics, and I don't think they hired her. I think she just showed up and they put her on stage or whatever. And it was kind of cool because Eddie kept saying things to see what it translated into.
Yeah.
And at one point, she was really getting into it because it's the music and things. So that kind of made sense. And then it came to the lead break. So Eddie went over and very politely and politically correctly danced with her. It was just this cool, like, hey, here's something that's not normal at a concert. Let's make a moment out of it. So yeah, but it's going to be interesting to see in 5 years where all this translation, and I think we have a book reader is back. Somebody sneaking in your background there. Maybe.
She got shooed away. She got shooed away. She wants to be her older sister used to do this too when I'd be podcasting, would want to come in while they want to see why I'm talking, right?
Yeah.
Is what the deal is. By the way, so ADA does not necessarily for some deaf individuals, transcripts are not enough. They actually they need the signing. They are more comfortable with the signing than they are with the reading. So providing transcripts does get you there, sort of, for some, but not for all. And so this was a mistake I made. I was like, well, why don't they just read the transcripts? And they were like, because some of them don't read English that well, just to be honest. And so you're like, oh, okay. Well, could we provide ASL in that case? And again, it's a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. It's a super niche, but it got me thinking about accessibility in some of this regard, and how could we do that? Because for them, for ASL speakers, signers, the communication, it's a foreign language. It's foreign to us. We couldn't understand it. Right? Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Ooh, what if you could have somebody signing and the screen could read that and put and say it? So for us who can hear,
ooh,
right. Anyways, there's so many things there with accessibility, and I think, and we miss the point, but I think it's cool. I think we're getting better at it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, and with face recognition technology, I mean, I think most of again, stupid middle-aged white guy, I don't know. I'm assuming all ASL is done through your hands, but I'm assuming there might be some sort of
lips too.
Something that you point to or whatever that, I'm with you. They got to be able to, if you can translate from Spanish to English, if this is, you just have to word everything maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. Let me give you just an example. Some concepts are difficult, right? Because if we're signing with Clifton Strengths, the language, right? We have these 34 terms. And when we say this term, like arranger, that's my number one, right? It's good at doing multiple things all at the same time. I like chaos. I have high adaptability. So I like lots of things happening all at the same time. When I say those words, they imply some meaning. You can't just spell them and have that meaning come across. I mean, you can just spell it, but the folks on the other end who were taking this were like, maybe we could come up with some symbols for this that actually make sense. Then you got to standardize them and some of those kinds of things. But
and I've seen just
this,
in movies,
like, this means simmer. You could spell it, but this means simmer. I can just say this, and you're like, oh yeah. How angry are you? I'm simmering. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Tiana says facial expressions are part
of
ASL, so that's where. Yeah. And I've also seen just from movies, there are times when people are, beating chests and just the way their hands are, you can tell that it's like, I am not happy right now. So, which
Yeah.
signed as like,
it's I love this conversation. I love that we're having it, and because it's not your typical podcast conversation,
right.
but listen, most of the podcasters that are listening to this today, you haven't given a second thought about providing something in a way that ASL provider or ASL folks can listen to your podcast. You don't think about it.
Right.
And so to me, it's one of those things you're like, oh yeah, I wonder what I could do differently, and we do transcripts. We do transcripts too, but yeah, anyways. So I appreciate you letting me go down that rabbit hole.
No, it wasn't as tricky because, like I know Buzzsprout, trying to think who else. With Libsyn, you could actually make the transcripts as a PDF and then use it as a file for download, link to it in your episodes, and then see how many people are downloading the transcript so you can tell if it's, worth it or not. But let's see Diane's got. Go ahead.
Pat had said, I think the reason in Chinese to English translation is so good is because the English training industry in China is a $14 billion industry. There's also 1.4 billion Chinese speakers around the world. So there's some opportunities there.
Yeah, Craig's got a great question. How can we optimize our websites besides just labeling our photos?
Well, 99% of the world can start labeling their photos.
Yeah, that would be
to start with. It's a huge problem. It's a gigantic problem.
Yeah, and then Tiana makes another great point. Think about it. Everybody wearing masks right now. If you're hearing impaired, you're like, look, I'm trying to read your lips, and all I see is a mask.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney.
Hearing people have problems with people in masks. Like sometimes I'm like, what? Because listen, I don't think we realize this is folks who can hear how much we're still reading lips.
Oh,
right. Put somebody in a mask, or Dave, like in your case, your video sync has been a little off. So we have sometimes you get a little kung fu-ish on us, where it's, it's just a little
I
off.
see that now.
Yeah.
Just a little.
No, and it's sometimes it's bad and sometimes it's okay, right? But you don't realize until that happens how much we're actually, like, if I wasn't reading your lips, I wouldn't have even noticed that. So even us hearing individuals we do lip reading when we can't really understand like with Dave, I was having trouble understanding some of the things he was saying, and so I was staring intently at his face like, okay, I need to understand this, right? So we still do that.
Oh man, poor Craig says I had to teach pronunciation while wearing a mask in class.
That would be hard. Would be hard. Yeah.
Paul McCartney said he loved the mask thing because he could go out in public. Nobody
knew
it was him.
True.
So
yeah, true. Do you feel anonymous sometimes when you're in public in a mask? Like all of a sudden people don't know who you are, and so you're a little more.
Well, my whole thing is I'll be in a grocery store, and let's say there's a parent with their kid, and I'm just staring at the kid because it's adorable. Well, if you could see my face, you would see the giant grin on my face, but you can't, and it's just some weird white guy that's staring at my kid.
Yeah.
It's like, so that's
well, and I think we realize how much we communicate with our eyes.
Oh man.
Well. And so you start seeing, because you can see some of people smile with their eyes.
Yeah. So
my eyes just disappear when I smile. they get really thin.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, they do.
You look like somebody out of Rudolph, which I think is on this week. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Oh,
a lot of those guys.
Nobody's going to be offended. Or
no, you do not have a red nose that glows. No. I love watching that because I now know all the weird things. Like there are parts where like, wait, that guy had like teeth in the last shot, and then 2 seconds later his teeth are gone. You're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. So yes, and Daniel says, I love creepy Dave staring at kids and happy people. Exactly. We have a quick question we can answer. This one's an easy one. This was from Azraf, I believe is how you pronounce it. He says, so last month I booked a guest that I've been admiring for a while. 5 days ago was supposed to be the interview day, but the guest didn't show up, even though the reminders have been sent 3 times. Then the guest emailed me saying sorry and wanted to reschedule, and she did. Yesterday was the interview day, but yeah, you know where this is going. She didn't show up. without any notice. Gotta admit, it made me upset. Yeah, I would be upset. So how do you deal with a guest that doesn't show up 2 times? Do you give them another chance? And my answer was no. I'm like, no. Unless grandma died again, something
Maybe it was
happened.
the other grandma.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
It happens.
So I don't know what would you do, Jim?
Well, I probably wouldn't invite it back after the first one.
Yeah.
I don't, unless you've paid them, they have no obligation except decency, right? And so, listen, the bigger deal the guest is, the more you're going to run into this. It's just going to happen. If you don't want this to happen, don't invite big deals. Don't invite famous people. Don't do this, because their schedules are constantly changing. And they're doing. I had a college student one time explain to me how college students handle their schedule. Like during the week, they get all these things that they hang on their activity clothesline for the weekend. And then when they get to the weekend, they just start pulling off what they want to do. They have way more things than they can actually do. They just start pulling off the highest priority or the ones that they want to do. Famous people are the same way. They have way more things that they can do in their schedule, and they're making priority decisions based on who's more important. Chances are, I keep coming back to this, right? Telling people they're not big deals. Chances are you're not as a big a deal as the one you got bumped for, right? You just got bumped because somebody else was a bigger deal than you were. If you don't like that, don't do it. Don't invite famous people to be on your podcast. If you realize, look, I'm just in the supply chain here, and I might be low on the priority poll, then you're going to have to keep going after them. Eventually you'll get them at some point, but you're going to have to put up with a bunch of cancellations and a bunch of really lame excuses and a whole bunch of I worked with Robert Scoble one time, and listen, Robert's life's turned a different direction, but God, just like all the different things that we had to move around to make that happen. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this very much anymore. It's just not worth it to me.
I can kind of smell them at times, because I had a guy out of nowhere. Hey, I do a business podcast. Would love to have you come on and talk podcasting. Great. I go to schedule, and it was literally like 4 months in advance.
Yeah.
And I was like, this probably is not going to happen. So sure enough, 4 months later, it gets rescheduled. This has been canceled and been moved to such and such. And I was like, there's strike one. And then there it went, but it was rescheduled. And then that came up, rescheduled again. So we're 6 months now from the original stuff. And then I saw where the last one was just canceled. And I don't know if it's because I never said, hey, what's the deal? I was just like, yeah, this is not going to happen. So I had one yesterday. Somebody scheduled me to be interviewed. Nice guy, met him and he just said, hey man, I'm sorry. My electricity went down and my whole system's kind of messed up. And I was like, not a big deal. Now I think we're going to do it in December. To me, it's no skin off my back. It's a bummer when you're waiting. I've had that happen where you're like, this week's interview is my content.
Yes. That sucks.
That's when you're like, all right, I guess I'm doing a solo show this week. Yeah, I see my video is way off now.
I think your PC's struggling. I think that's what's going on.
I did not reboot this morning, and I think that's usually,
and it's okay. It's okay. Most people listen to the audio only. Gary had said, he did wait, and it was worth the wait, and that can be the case too.
Yeah.
I think if the more important your guest, the more you better be ready for him to back out, and have something. In your case, Dave, if I was going to have, let's say I was going to have Joe Biden on, I don't know why I'd have Joe Biden on Home Gadget Geeks, but let's just say I was going to have him on. Well, I would probably have some backup plans, right? Because you're just like, chances are that's going to get canceled, right? Or, an Elon Musk, or, that'd probably be more appropriate in my space. But you just can't book somebody like that and then be like, shocked when their schedule changed. You got to be ready for that.
Or shocked if they stay awake.
That's true.
Be talking to him. This is time. Come on, man.
Oh, we're back to the president. I'm sorry. Yeah.
He does have some catchisms. Come on, man,
so
is one.
So good.
Another one is I'm not joking. He says that a lot. No joke. No joke.
Yeah, I always say I'm not going to lie. That's like I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. I say that all the time. I've got those little things. Yeah, Daniel, you can't YouTube only admins can put links
I did not know that. So
in the YouTube chat.
that's
Yeah,
all right. Daniel can send it to me later. I'll be happy to put it in the show notes.
Right.
Awesome. 12 o'clock it is already. Holy cow. So
oh wow.
I might actually dig out the Christmas stuff, because my family does that weird thing where Christmas is like December like 15th or something like that. I'll have to talk to because my brother goes to Florida usually like a week early. So we have Christmas literally like a week and a half beforehand. So, but happy Thanksgiving to anyone who's doing the Thanksgiving thing.
Yeah.
We're actually we have a cousin and his wife and like 3 kids are coming over to my brother's house, which usually is just the 3 of us and some football. We're like, my brother rearranged his entire basement to make room for people to watch football.
Nice.
Because I was like, man, this might not. He's like, no, dude, we are watching football on Thanksgiving. He
Detroit
goes,
and Dallas, right? Those are the 2 games. It's always Detroit and Dallas.
Yeah,
I think it is. Detroit's terrible this year.
Yeah. So,
which is like every year.
How
is that different? Anyways, all right. Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody. If you celebrate that, and we'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you next week. Take care. See ya.